Students, in this particular video, we are going to talk about the chapter 13, Biodiversity and Conservation. And we are also going to cover some of the new topics that have been added to the syllabus, which are not there in NCRT. They are there mentioned in the curriculum of 2024-25. This is the screenshot from the curriculum only. So these topics like hotspot, endangered organism, extinction, red data book, sacred group is there. Biosphere Reserve, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and Ramsar sites. These are not there in NCRT. This topic is there in the supplementary material. So we are going to cover all these topics today in this particular video, and we are going to quickly revise the entire chapter. So on Earth, we find enormous diversity. We find diverse types of organism, be it plants or animals or microorganisms. There are more than 20,000 species of ants. There are more than 3 lakh species of beetles, 28,000 fishes, 20,000 species of orchids. So these are some of the factual um, question could be framed from this particular part, and we are going to remain confined to NCRT only. So this from this particular part, some factual question could be framed. Now, what exactly biodiversity is? It is the immense diversity, like on Earth, we find enormous species of plants, animals, microorganism. So this diversity is very immense, and it is also referred to as the heterogeneity. Heterogeneity means different types of organism, and the biodiversity, it is present at the species level plus at all levels of the biological organization, starting from the macromolecules present inside the cell to the large biomes. These macromolecules inside the cells, they make up the cells, cells make up the tissues, tissues make up the organs, then organ system, then organism, then population. So this way, right from micromolecules to macromolecules, then to biomes, there is enormous biodiversity present on Earth. The term biodiversity, it was given by Edward Wilson to describe the combined diversity at all levels of biological organization. So basically, there are three types of biodiversity which is mentioned here in NCRT. First is genetic diversity. So the single species, when we talk about the diversity within the single species, it is referred to as the genetic diversity. For example, this particular plant, which is Rauwolfia vomitora, this particular plant species, it is has it is found in growing in different Himalayan ranges, and different plants of it has different potency as well as concentration. Very important point here. A direct question could be framed from here. So there is a particular chemical called as reserpine. It is found inside the in this particular plant, Rauwolfia vomitora. It grows in different Himalayan ranges, which differs in potency as well as concentration. So there are genetic variations which are found in this particular medicinal plant. That means there are different varieties of this particular plant, and they have different potency and different concentration. So there is diversity at the genetic level. Okay, so basically whenever there is high diversity at the genetic level over its distributional range, this is referred to as the genetic diversity. Okay, now another example. This is first example. This is another example. India, it has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice. The third example, there are 1,000 varieties of mango present in India. So these are the examples of genetic diversity. 1. Rauwolfia vomitora, 2. rice strains, and 3. mango. Okay, now what is species diversity? The diversity at the species level. Okay, the diversity at the species level is referred to as species diversity. On the Western Ghats, there is greater amphibian species diversity than the Eastern Ghats. Next is ecological diversity. At ecosystem level, In India, we find deserts, rainforests, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, and alpine meadows, which has greater ecosystem diversity than any of these Scandinavian countries such as Norway. So it has taken millions of years to accumulate this wealth, but we may lose all the wealth in less than 2 centuries if in case the present rate of species losses continue. So how many species are there on earth and how many in India? According to International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, which is IUCN, 2024, total number of the plants and animal species is described to be more than 1.5 million. Many taxonomic groups, species, inventories are more complete in temperate than in tropical countries. Now, what this statement means? It means that in the tropical region, there are many species which have not yet been discovered or named, but in temperate region, because diversity is low in the temperate region, so the number of species are almost all the species have been discovered from this particular area if we compare the temperate region to the tropical region. So that is why this statement says that in many taxonomic groups the species inventories are more complete in temperate region than in the tropical countries. I hope you are aware what are tropical areas and the temperate areas. Let's say this is the equator. So 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degree south. This region is called as the tropical area. This region from 66 degree north here 66 degrees south, this particular region and this particular region, these are referred to as the temperate areas. So the diversity is low in temperate areas and the diversity is more in the tropical areas. So there are more species which are still waiting to be discovered from the tropical region. According to some estimates, 20 to 50 million. More conservative and scientifically sound estimate by Robert May, it places the global species diversity to 7 million. Very important. According to the estimate, see, according to some of the estimates, there are around 20 to 50 million species. But according to the estimate by Robert May, the total global species diversity is 7 million. More than 70% of all species recorded are animals, while the plants including fungi, algae, bryophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms, it is less than 22% of the total. Okay, 70% are animals and 22% are algae, fungi, bryophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms. They are plants. So here you can see this region, this is the tropical region. Tropical region, it receives more rainfall and more temperature is there. So this region is the tropical region where biodiversity is high. This region is the temperate region. This region is again the temperate region. So biodiversity is comparatively lower in the temperate region in comparison to the tropical region. And when we move towards the pole here, towards the polar regions, the biodiversity keeps on decreasing. So among animals, insects, they are most species are present in these two groups. Rich taxonomic groups are there. These are the rich taxonomic groups with more than 70% of the total organisms. Out of every 10 animals, 7 are insects. Fungi species are more in comparison to the combined total of species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals. Biologists, they are not sure about the total number of the prokaryotic species. Why? Why the biologists are not sure about the total number of the prokaryotic species? There are two reasons for it. First of all, the conventional taxonomic methods, they are not suitable for identify microbial species. That means we don't have means to find out about the different types of microorganisms present. And second problem is many species are simply not culturable under laboratory conditions, so we cannot exactly find out about them. Okay, so that is why no exact data is available about the prokaryotic species. If we accept biochemical or molecular criteria for delineating species for prokaryotes, then their diversity alone might run into millions. So, if in case we get to know about the different methods to find out about various types of prokaryotes present on Earth, then alone their diversity, that means the diversity of prokaryotes alone may run into millions. So, this is the graph, very important. In your examination you can get questions based on on this pie chart, or it can be given blank to you. You may be asked to fill it. Okay, so here you can see the data of the invertebrates. More than 75% are insects, then mollusk, okay, then crustaceans and other animal groups. They occupy this much portion. Now, when we talk about the vertebrates, so approximately 50% are fishes, then mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. And when we talk about plants, more than 40%, okay, more than 40% are fungi. Sorry, more than, let's say, more than 40% are fungi, more than 40% are angiosperms here, and there is a little portion which is covered by ferns, mosses, algae and the lichens. So this particular chart, it should be on your tips. Representing this particular chart, it represents the global biodiversity proportionate number of the species of the major taxa or of plants, invertebrates and vertebrates. It has been shown here. Now in India there are 2.4% of world's total area. India occupies 2.4% of the world's total land area, whereas global species diversity is 8.1%. That means this much area it covers of the total globe, and this much is the biodiversity it harbors. Okay, so this again forms an important point, which makes India one of the 12 mega diversity countries of the world. There are 45,000 species of plants and twice animals which have been recorded from India. Now, next important point, a question could be framed from here. May's global estimate. Who is this May? He is Robert May. We've just talked about Robert May's estimate. So, only 22% of the total species have been recorded so far. Applying this proportion to India's diversity figures, there are more than 1 lakh plant species and more than 3 lakh animal species which are yet to be discovered and described. Okay, important, you must know this. Okay, to complete inventory of biological wealth in India, what all do we require? Okay, to complete inventory, it means to find out about the different types of plants and animals. So, what is required? First of all, immense trained manpower is required, taxonomists are required, time is required, and the third thing is a large fraction of these species they face threat of becoming extinct even before discovered. That means even before we discover them, they might become extinct. Nature's biological library is burning even before we catalog the titles of all books stocked there. This point means that in nature we may not be able to discover some of the plants or animals because they may become extinct even before we find out about them. This is the meaning of this statement. Now let's see the patterns of biodiversity. I have just told you about this, that this is the tropical area. This pink colored portion is the tropical area. This is the temperate area. This is again the temperate area. And when we move towards the poles, the biodiversity decreases. So here in this pink zone, the biodiversity is maximum. It keeps on decreasing, decreasing, decreasing as we reach the poles. Similarly, when we move this side, also the biodiversity keeps on decreasing. Why? Because the conditions are not favorable. Okay, there is more rainfall and more temperature in the tropical region. Therefore, the biodiversity is high in the tropical region. So basically, The diversity we find in plants and animals, it is not uniform throughout the world. It shows uneven distribution. Species diversity, it decreases as we move away from the equator towards the poles. The tropics, which cover the area of latitudinal area 23.5 degrees north to 23.5 degrees south, there are more species than temperate or the polar areas. Okay, in the tropical areas there are more species in comparison to temperate or the polar areas. Forest tropical regions such as Ecuador, it has 10 times species of vascular plants. In these forests, 10 times species of vascular plants as a forest of equal area in the temperate region like the Midwest of USA. Now you all must have heard about Amazon forest. So tropical Amazon forest in South America, it has the greatest biodiversity on earth. It is home to more than 40,000 species of plants, 3,000 of fishes, 1,300 of birds, 427 of mammals, 427 of amphibians, 378 of reptiles, and of more than 1,25,000 of invertebrates. So we cannot skip this factual information, so you must keep this in mind. Okay, now important information given in NCRT here. Colombia, which is located near the equator. Here you can see this is here, Colombia is located here. So this is located near the equator. It has 1400 species of birds. New York, which is at 41 degree north, here is New York. It has 105 species. So here 1400 species are there. Here 105 species are there. Greenland is here. So in Greenland there are 56 species of birds. And in India, here is India. In India there are 1200 species of birds. So this is basically a comparison of the total number of the species of birds that are found at the different latitudinal uh, areas of earth. Okay, in now we are talking again about the Amazon forest. In the Amazon forest there are at least 2 million insect species which are still waiting to be discovered and named. Now from this particular point, a very important question could be framed, and this question has come in board examinations earlier also. What is the question? Why tropical diversity, why in tropical areas the greater biological diversity is there? Okay, so what is the answer of this question? Speciation, first point, speciation, it is a function of time. So unlike temperate regions subjected to frequent glaciations in past, tropical latitudes have remained undisturbed for millions of years and thus had a long evolutionary time for species diversification. It means that in temperate areas there were glaciations taking place. So these regions they remained disturbed, whereas in the tropical areas there was no glaciation, there was no ice formation, there was no disturbance. So the life flourished in the tropical areas. Then tropical environment, unlike temperate ones, are less seasonal, relatively more constant and predictable. Such constant environment promote niche specialization and leads to a greater species diversity. There is more solar energy available in tropics, which contribute to higher productivity. This in turn might contribute indirectly to greater diversity. Okay, so this question would carry, in case it comes in your exam, it would at least carry 3 marks. Okay, now let's talk about the species area relationship. So what basically they are talking about in this particular topic is that as we keep on exploring a particular area, let's say this is an area, if we keep on exploring a particular area, then we would find more and more species. Suppose we explore, we start from this point, keep on exploring more and more area, then we would find more and more species. Okay, so this is basically species area relationships in simple terms. Okay, so there was in South American jungles, there was a scientist, German naturalist rather, and a geographer. His name was Alexander von Humboldt. Humboldt, very important. observed what he observed, that within a region species richness increased with increasing explored area, but up to a limit. Okay, that means if we keep on exploring a particular area, the species richness keeps on increasing, but up to a limit. That means only we would be able to find only those many species which are present in that area. Okay, relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa, angiosperm plants, birds, bats, freshwater fishes, it turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola. What does it mean? It means, I'll show you, it means that this shape is called as rectangular hyperbola. Okay, so basically this is the relation between area. On x-axis area is taken, on the y-axis species richness is taken, and if we try to plot the number of species against area, then we would get this kind of a shape, and this shape is referred to as the rectangular hyperbola. Okay, so on a logarithmic scale, I'll read out this statement again. Relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of taxa turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola. Now on the log scale, okay, now what is the equation of this rectangular hyperbola? It is S is equal to CA to the power Z. Now when this here S, it indicates the species richness, okay, and A is the area. Now when this particular equation it is converted to log form, then the equation becomes log S is equal to log C plus Z log A, and the straight line is obtained. It is on the log scale, this particular equation becomes this, and a straight line is obtained. Now what is represented by S? Species richness, A is the area, Z is the slope of line, and C is the y-intercept. The Z is also referred to as the regression coefficient. Remember, a numerical question could be framed from here. Okay, so this is the equation, log S is equal to log C plus Z log A. Now value of Z, this entire information is very important. The value of Z, it ranges between 0.1 to 0.2 regardless of taxonomic group or regions, whether it is plants in Britain, birds in California, or mollusk in New York. The slope of regression line are amazingly similar. That means on a larger scale, if we try to find out the Z value of the entire biodiversity present on earth, then the value of Z, it comes out to be 0 between 0.1 to 0.2. But for very large areas such as continent, here we are talking on global scale, but when we are talking about continent, then the slope is 0.6 to 1.2. The Z value lies between 0.6 to 1.2. But when we are talking about more uh, when we are talking about frugivorous, that means fruit eating birds or mammals in the tropical forest where their biodiversity is more, then we find that the regression uh, coefficient Z, it is 1.15. Okay, so what do steeper slopes mean in this context? We have just seen that this is rectangular hyperbola, this is the straight line that we obtain on the log scale. So in case the area is more biodiversity rich, then this slope becomes more steep. Okay, this slope is becoming steeper. In case we get this kind of a slope, then this slope is becoming more steeper. So what is this indicating? It is indicating that here there is less biodiversity, here there is more biodiversity, and here the biodiversity is very high. Okay, as the slope it becomes steeper, it indicates that biodiversity is increasing in that area. Okay, now let's talk about the importance of species diversity to ecosystem. For many decades, ecologists believe that communities with more species generally tend to be more stable than those with less species. What are the characteristics of the stable community? They should not show too much variation in productivity from year to year. They must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances, which disturbances like the natural or the man made disturbances. The stable community must also be resistant to invasions by alien species. We don't know how these attributes are linked to species richness in a community, but David Tillman's long term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots provide some tentative answers. It means that we are not sure how the number of species they make the community stable or unstable, but there are certain experiments which were carried out by this particular scientist David Tillman, from which we can conclude, we get to know about the answer of this question, how community stability is related to number of species. So Tillman, he found that plots with more species showed less year to year variation in total biomass, and when there is less variation, that means there is more stability. Okay, so basically more species, it means less, sorry, more stability, more stability. Less species, less stability. More species, more stability. He also showed that increasing diversity contributed to higher productivity. Species richness contributed to well-being of an ecosystem. Rich biodiversity is not only essential for ecosystem health but imperative for very survival of human race on this planet. Does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Okay, so we will get to know if in case this question comes in your exam. So you're going to write the answer of this question by explaining the rivet papara hypothesis. I'll just tell you about it. Would Western Ghats ecosystem be less functional if one of its tea frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected if, say, instead of 20,000 we have only 15,000 species of ants on earth? So in case any of this question comes in your exam in the form of assertion reason question or MCQ, so you are going to explain that basically the species becoming extinct, it depends on the its role in the ecosystem. If it is a important link in the ecosystem, important species in the ecosystem, then it is going to affect the stability of the ecosystem. Okay, and it is basically directly linked to your rivet popper hypothesis. It was given by Stanford ecologist Paul Eldridge, very important. So what did he say? He said that in an airplane here is compared to the ecosystem. All parts are joined together using thousands of rivets, and the rivets here are compared to the species. Okay, suppose this is the airplane, and the bolts which are used to join the different parts, they are called as the rivets. So if every passenger traveling in it starts popping a rivet to take home, it may not affect the flight safety initially, but as more and more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Okay, and if we compare this hypothesis with species, then it becomes that if in case the species are becoming extinct one by one, then initially the functioning may not be affected, but slowly, as more and more species are becoming extinct, slowly and steadily the proper functioning of the ecosystem may not take place. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may also be critical. So loss of rivets on the wings. Okay, so wings are here compared to the key species, the important species that drives the major ecosystem functions, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of a few rivets on seats or windows inside the plane. That means if we keep on removing the rivets from the seat or the window, then the flight safety may not be affected. But if the rivets are removed from the wings of the airplane, then the flight safety would be affected severely. Okay, similarly, key species are removed, then the ecosystem will be affected seriously. Now let's talk about loss of biodiversity. We are doubtful if any new species are added to the biodiversity of the earth but through speciation, but we are very sure that earth's treasury of the species is continuously losing due to human activities. Colonization of tropical Pacific islands by human, it has led to the extinction of more than 2000 species of native birds. According to the IUCN Red List, which was released in 2004, it documents extinction of 784 species, including 338 vertebrates, 359 invertebrates, and 87 plants in the last 500 years. There are recent extinction of these organisms: dodo from Mauritius, quagga from Africa, thylacine from Australia, stellar sea cow from Russia, and three subspecies of Bali, Javan, Caspian of tiger. In the last 20 years, there has been disappearance of 27 species. This is dodo, this is quagga, this is thylacine, and this is stellar sea cow. So extinction across the taxa are not random. Some groups like amphibians appear to be more vulnerable to extinction. Remember this point. Okay, amphibians are more vulnerable to extinction. That means they may quickly get extinct due to human activities. More than 15,500 species worldwide are facing threat of extinction. Presently, 12% of birds, 23% of mammals, 32% of amphibians, and 31% of gymnosperms are facing the threat of extinction. Large scale loss of species, it has also happened earlier, even before humans inhabited the earth. So, during the long period of more than 3 billion years ago, since the origin and diversification of earth, there have occurred 5 episodes of mass extinction of species. Okay, and the current extinction of species, current episode of extinction of species, it is called as the sixth extinction. It is presently in progress. It is different from the previous episodes. Why? A question could be framed from here. Why it is different from the previous episodes. In the previous episodes of extinction, there was no human activity involved, but here, due to human disturbances, due to pollution and other reasons, uh, the extinction rate has become higher. Current species extinction rates are estimated to be 100 to 1000 times faster than in pre-human times, and our activities are responsible for faster rates. Ecologists warn that if the present trend continues, nearly half of all the species on Earth might be wiped out within the next 100 years. In general, loss of biodiversity in a region may lead to decline in plant population production, lowered resistance to environmental perturbations such as drought, increased variability in certain ecosystem processes such as plant productivity, water use, and pest and disease cycles. Okay, so a question could be framed: loss of biodiversity in a region, what does it may lead to? Now, what are the causes of biodiversity losses? Basically, there are four reasons. That is why it is referred to as the evil quartet. Very, very important. In the recent past board examinations, this question has been framed from this particular part. Now, the first and the major cause of the most important cause of biodiversity loss is habitat loss and fragmentation. Example is tropical rainforest. More than 14% of the Earth's land surface it covers. So these rainforest now has become 6%. From 14, they have decreased to 6%. By the time you finish reading this chapter, 1000 more hectares of the rainforest would have been lost. The Amazon rainforest, which are referred to as the lungs of the planet. So here, by what is happening there? Cultivating soya bean, important. Cultivating soya bean and The cutting the forest and converting them into grasslands, these are two major reasons why they are being cut. For raising the beef cattle, they are cut to make them as the grasslands. Besides total loss, the degradation of many habitats by pollution also threatens the survival of many species. So here this is the third cause. Large habitats, they are broken into small fragments. The mammals and the birds which require the large territories and the animals which have the migratory habits, they are badly affected and their population declines. Okay, so if you're asked about habitat loss, you are going to talk about this. If you're asked about fragmentation, you are going to talk about this particular point. Next is overexploitation. In the last 500 years, there are many organisms which have become which are badly affected, such as Steller sea cow and passenger pigeon. They have become extinct. Marine fish around the world, they are over harvested, which are endangering. There is endangering existence of commercially important species of fishes. Now, third reason is alien species invasion. So, due to some alien species which is introduced in a particular area, the indigenous species might get affected. So, introducing any organism unintentionally or deliberately, it sometimes turns out to be invasive, which causes the decline or extinction of the indigenous species. So, here example of Nile perch is given, important. It was present in Lake Victoria in the East Africa. It has extinction of an ecologically unique assemblage of more than 200 species of cichlid fish in the lake. It has caused the extinction. Okay, because of Nile perch, which was introduced in Lake Victoria, there were 200 species of cichlid fish in the lake which has become extinct. Environmental damage caused and threat posed to our native species by invasive species like carrot grass, another example, which is also called as Parthenium, Lantana, and water hyacinth, Eichhornia. So these three are the examples from plant kingdom. So they are also alien species which were introduced in an area and they caused a threat to the plants which were found in that local area. Illegal introduction, this is third example, illegal introduction of African catfishes, which is, what is the name of that African catfish? It is Clarius garipinus. Okay, it's a scientific name, it should be underlined. It should be written in italics. African catfish, Clarius garipinus, for cultural aquaculture purpose. Because it was introduced, some of the indigenous catfishes of our rivers became extinct. Okay, so one, we've talked about Nile perch. We've talked about some plants such as carrot grass, lantana, and water hyacinth, and we have talked about the African catfish. Now, co-extinction, it means when one species becomes extinct, the other species which is directly dependent on it for survival also becomes extinct. So, when a species become extinct, plant and animal species associated with it in an obligatory way also becomes extinct. When a host fish species become extinct, its unique assemblage of parasites also meets the same fate. Another example is the case of co-evolved plant pollinator mutualism, where extinction of one invariably leads to extinction of the other. It means that if the plant is going to become extinct, the pollinator dependent on it will become extinct. Or we can say if the pollinator become extinct, then the plant which is dependent on the pollinator for its pollination also becomes extinct. Now let's talk about biodiversity conservation. So there are certain reasons why biodiversity should be conserved. So there are 3 points in it: narrowly utilitarian arguments, broadly utilitarian arguments, and ethical arguments. So one by one we're going to study about three of them. So we derive economic benefits from nature, such as food. We get food, cereals, pulses, fruits, firewood, fiber, construction material. Industrial products such as tannins, lubricants, dyes, resins, perfumes, and products of medicinal importance. So we get all this. So that is why the biodiversity should be preserved. There are more than 25% of the drugs which are currently sold in the market worldwide are derived from plants, and 25,000 species of plants they contribute to the traditional medicines used by native people around the world. With increasing resources put into bioprospecting, nations endowed with rich biodiversity can expect to reap enormous benefits. So, there are enormous benefits. We have talked about the food and other material which we get from biodiversity. We've talked about medicine. We have talked about the enormous benefits that the nations they derive from rich biodiversity. So that is why biodiversity should be conserved. So this is the narrowly utilitarian argument in support of conservation of biodiversity. Then we talk about broadly utilitarian arguments. So biodiversity plays a major role in many ecosystem services that nature provides, such as the Amazon forest. It is responsible for 20% of the total oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. Pollination gets done by the insects or the pollinators such as bees, bumblebees, birds, and bats. There is aesthetic pleasure if we walk through the thick woods, spring flowers, we see, and the bulbul song we hear. So all this is provided to us by nature, all this is provided to us by the biodiversity, so it should be preserved. This is the broadly utilitarian argument in support of biodiversity conservation. Then there is ethical argument in support. Okay, it relates to what we owe to millions of plants, animals, and micro species with whom we share this plant. Philosophically, spiritually, we need to realize that every species has an intrinsic value, and it is our moral duty to pass on our biological legacy in good order to future generations. So, these are the points which support the ethical argument for the conservation of the biological diversity. Okay, like we have the right to live on earth, similarly all other organisms also have the right to live on earth. So this is basically the ethical argument in support of conservation of biodiversity. A 5 mark question, 3 question could be framed from this particular topic. Now let's move further. How do we conserve biodiversity? First of all, protection of the whole system, ecosystem. If we are going to do, then its biodiversity at all levels is going to be protected. For example, if we save the whole forest, then for example, if we save the tiger, then in turn the whole forest is saved. So this is called as in situ or on-site conservation. So here in this topic we are going to talk about in situ and ex situ conservation. So basically, so when an organism is saved or protected in the area where it is present, where its habitat is there, then it is called as in situ conservation. And if you are taking an organism to a different area and protecting it in a different area, then it is referred to as ex situ conservation. So when there are situations where an animal or plant is endangered or threatened and needs urgent measures to save it from extinction, ex situ conservation is the desirable approach. Okay, so here they are talking about ex situ conservation. So it is the desirable approach when an organism is facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild or near future. In situ conservation, let's look at it in detail. Faced with the conflict between development and conservation, many nations find it unrealistic and economically not feasible to conserve all their biological wealth. Number of species waiting to be saved from extinction far exceeds conservation resources available. So on global basis, this problem is addressed by certain eminent conservationists. Biological hotspots. Now they have mentioned about biological hotspot. They are the regions with very high levels of species richness and high degree of endemism. Okay. So what is endemism? It means the species which are confined to that region and not found anywhere else. There are 25 biodiversity hotspots. 9 more have been added to it, and the total becomes 34 biodiversity hotspots. You must remember this data. 34 biodiversity hotspots they are present on earth. These hotspots are also regions of accelerated habitat loss. There are three important hotspots. In India, we are talking about Western Ghats in Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma, and Himalaya. It covers our country's exceptionally high biodiversity regions. These are very high biodiversity regions of our country. They are the three main hotspots. All biodiversity hotspots, they cover less than 2% of the Earth's land area. Number of the species they collectively harbor is extremely high. Although the area they cover is less than 2%, but they harbor a very high degree of biodiversity. And strict protection of these hotspots is required, then only ongoing mass extinction is going to get reduced. In India, ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions, they are legally protected as biosphere reserves, national parks and sanctuaries. In India, there are 14 biosphere reserves, there are 90 national parks and 448 wildlife sanctuaries. Now let's talk about sacred groves. Important question could be framed from here. In India, there is history of religious and cultural traditions for the protection of nature. You must have also seen this in many of the South Indian movies also. In many cultures, tracts of forest were set aside and trees and wildlife within were venerated and given total protection. The wildlife is respected there. It is honored and it is given total protection. Such sacred groves are found in, these are the four examples, Khasi and Jaintia hills and Meghalaya, and in Meghalaya they are the last refuges to some of the rare and the threatened plants. Aravali hills of Rajasthan, Western Ghats regions of Karnataka and Maharashtra, Sarguja, Chanda and Bastar areas of Madhya Pradesh. Now let's talk about ex situ conservation. So threatened animals and plants, they are taken out from their natural habitat. They are placed in special setting where they can be protected and given special care. Example, zoological parks, botanical gardens and the wildlife safari parks. Many animals that have become extinct in wild but continue to be maintained in zoological parks. Gametes of threatened species can be preserved in viable and fertile condition for long periods using cryopreservation techniques. Eggs can be fertilized in vitro and plants can be propagated using tissue culture methods. Seeds of different genetic strains of commercially important plants, they are kept in the seed banks. Okay, have you heard about Svalbard bank? There is a particular bank in which basically Svalbard vault, if you have heard about the different seeds of important plants are kept in that. You research about it and you discuss it with your friends and teachers. So in case there is some natural calamity or any disturbance which might take place on earth in future, so for that purpose there are certain important seeds of plants which have been preserved, kept safely in this I should say these seed banks. Okay, biodiversity, it has no political boundaries and its conservation is a collective responsibility of all nations. Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the Earth Summit, it was held in Rio de Janeiro. A question was framed from here and the question from this point has appeared in NEET also. In 1992, all nations to take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefit. This was the purpose of this particular summit. World Summit on Sustainable Development, it was held in 2002 in Johannesburg. South Africa, 190 countries, they pledged their commitment to achieve by 2010 a significant reduction in current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional and the local levels. Hotspots. Now, from here, I'll be discussing some of the points which are mentioned in the curriculum, but they are not there in NCERT. So, briefly, we are going to talk about them. First is hotspots, biodiversity hotspot. They are the regions with both rich in species and they have experienced significant habitat loss. These areas are crucial for conservation due to their unique ecosystem and high level of endemism. India is home to several biodiversity hotspots, including the Western Ghats, Himalayas, Indo-Burma region. These areas they harbor a vast array of plant and animal species, many of which are endangered. Protecting these hotspots is essential for global biodiversity conservation. India's efforts, including establishing protecting areas and promoting sustainable development, aim to preserve these critical regions, balancing ecological protection with economic growth. Endangered organisms, they are species at risk of extinction due to factors like habitat destruction, illegal hunting, climate change, and pollution. In India, several species are classified as endangered, including the Bengal tiger, Asiatic lion, Indian rhinoceros, and the snow leopard. These species they face threats from poaching and habitat fragmentation, often due to human activities. Conservation programs such as wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, and breeding efforts play a critical role in protecting these organisms. So, by strengthening legal protections and promoting sustainable development, India aims to safeguard its unique biodiversity for future generations, ensuring the survival of endangered species. Extinction Extinction occurs when a species is no longer found anywhere on Earth. Why? Due to certain factors such as habitat loss, poaching, pollution, and climate change. Once lost, an extinct species cannot be recovered, leading to irreversible ecological consequences. In India, subspecies such as Asiatic lion, Indian rhinoceros, and the Bengal tiger have faced severe threats of extinction, though conservation efforts have been successful in some cases. Initiatives like protected areas, breeding programs, and anti poaching laws are vital for preventing further losses. Protecting biodiversity is very crucial as it plays a significant role in maintaining ecological balance and local livelihoods. Red Data Book. The Red Data Book it was published by IUCN International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. It's a comprehensive record of endangered species worldwide. It classifies organisms based on their risk of extinction, ranging from least concern to critically endangered. This way, the organisms they are classified such as extinct, extinct in wild, regionally extinct, critically extinct. So this all data it is available in the Red Data Book. In India, Red Data Book plays a crucial role in conservation efforts, highlighting species like Bengal tiger, okay, Indian rhinoceros, and the Gangetic dolphin. It serves as an important tool for policymakers, researchers, and conservationists, guiding efforts to protect these species. It also helps raise awareness and supports for endangered wildlife, emphasizing the need for immediate conservation actions. Biosphere reserves, they are designated areas aimed at preserving biodiversity, protecting ecosystem and promoting sustainable development. In India, there are 18 biosphere reserves such as Nilgiri and Sundarbans, which safeguard unique wildlife and plant species. These reserves play a key role in conservation while supporting research, ecotourism, and the livelihoods of local communities, balancing ecology and development. National parks, they are protected areas that preserve wildlife and natural landscapes. In India, these parks are Jim Corbett, Kaziranga, and Sundarbans. They safeguard the diverse ecosystem and endangered species. They play a vital role in conservation, providing habitats for tigers, elephants, and rhinos. National parks also promote ecotourism, raising awareness and supporting local communities while preserving the environment. Wildlife refers to animals, birds, and plants that live in their natural habitats free from human interference. India, rich in biodiversity, is home to unique species like the Bengal tiger, Indian elephant, and one horned rhinoceros. Conservation efforts, including national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, are crucial in protecting these species and maintaining ecological balance for future generations. Sanctuaries, they are the designated areas aimed at protecting wildlife and their natural habitats. In India, these sanctuaries are vital for conserving species such as tigers, elephants, and rhinos, providing safe spaces for endangered flora and fauna. India's network of sanctuaries like the Kaziranga and the Jim Corbett also boost ecotourism, promoting both conservation efforts and sustainable economic development in local communities. Ramsar sites, this topic is mentioned in the supplementary material. It's not there in NCRT, but it is given in supplementary materials. And an important question could be framed from here. What are Ramsar site? They are certain areas, okay, where the protection of biodiversity is done. So Ramsar Convention, it was held. It is basically Ramsar Convention is basically international treaty for conservation and utilization of wetlands, recognizing fundamental ecological functions of wetlands and their economic, cultural, scientific, and recreational value. This treaty was signed in 1971. Australia was one of the first country to sign the Ramsar Convention. The convention was named after the city Ramsar in Iran. Under Ramsar Convention, a wide variety of natural and human-made habitat types ranging from river to coral reefs can be classified as Ramsar wetlands. Wetlands, they include the marshes, lakes, coral reefs, etc. So basically these Ramsar sites, it encourages the designation of sites containing wetlands and the that are important for conserving biodiversity. They broadly aims to conserve worldwide loss of wetlands, and this can be conserved by wise use and management of water resources. This requires policy making and technology transfer. Examples. So basically what are Ramsar sites? They are certain areas which needs to be protected, and these areas are basically wet lands, okay, where a lot of moisture, a lot of water is found on earth. So Ashtamudi wetland, it's present in Kerala, Bhitarkanika Manurus, Orissa, Bhojkatland in Madhya Pradesh, and Chandratal in Himachal Pradesh. These are some of the examples of the wetlands which have been identified as the Ramsar sites. Indian wetlands are of intervention importance under the Ramsar Convention. All joining parodies of the Ramsar Convention, they commit themselves to work towards the three pillars of the convention. What were the three pillars? Basically, ensuring the conservation and wise use of wetlands, including as far as possible wise use of all wetlands in national environment planning. So whenever any planning is done, in national planning is done, then wetlands are also to be considered. Consulting with other parties or other nations about the implementation of the convention, especially in regard to frame boundary wetland or shared water system and the shared species. It means that in case there is some wetland which covers two countries, which lies in between two countries, so the certain policies should be made by both the countries in order to safeguard that wetland. Okay, so with this we come to the end